Welcome to another episode of Systematic Geekology. This is a space where we seek to create and cultivate healthy conversations between those things we geek out on and the philosophical and theological questions that often arise out of our fandoms. Like, what does it mean to be human? What makes a hero? What makes a villain? How do the stories and narratives we geek out on shape how we live in the world? We are your priest to the geeks. We aren't all ordained, but we see ourselves as mediators at the intersection of geek culture and going deeper in our faith. We don't always have to agree, but we do respect each other, and we see everyone as a beloved child of God. Everyone geeks out on something, so come geek out with us and enjoy the show.
You're listening to an Anazal Ministries podcast.
Does a soul have substance? Can a person be divided between their parts? How do transporters work anyway? We answer these questions and more on this episode of Systematic Geekology, where we are the priests to the geeks. Today, we are tackling the all-important question Bones has been asking for almost 60 years. Do transporters kill you? Today's illustrious hosts are myself, Matthew Winter, the good Reverend Justin Coleman, and our resident science guy, Andy Walsh. How are you guys?
Fine, thanks. How are you?
Doing pretty well.
Good so far. So, what have we all been geeking out on lately? Andy, I'm going to start with you because we haven't worked together yet.
All right. The biggest thing I've been geeking out on lately, honestly, is a new preprint, a scientific paper that came out about simulating origin of life. A group out of Google Research did some computer programming, evolutionary computing simulations, just starting with random programs, no fitness function or anything, and actually got self-replicating organisms out of that, which I believe is the first demonstration of the emergence of self-replication rather than starting with replicating organisms. So very fascinating, very exciting paper. It was discussed on Sean Carroll's podcast. It's that Preposterous Universe. I always forget the name of the podcast itself. But anyway, Sean Carroll, the physicist, has a podcast, and this week's episode was all about this research. So it's pretty cool.
Wow, that's really cool.
Very cool.
Justin?
Well, first, we have learned that when we start talking about what we're geeking out on, he gets to go last next time. Next time, he gets to go last. Because it's downhill from there, at least with me. I don't want to... I don't know. I've actually been enjoying reading through a fairly long book by Rabbi Shai Held titled "Judaism is About Love." It really is essentially saying, "Hey, I know you Christians feel like you can't corner the market on this God and love thing, but it's actually rooted in the Hebrew Bible, rooted in the Old Testament." And so just talking about that, and really some fascinating and really insightful takes on passages that Christians tend to interpret in other ways. And so I have enjoyed that. And then I'm going to do part two. Part two is the show Fallout, which I, based on the game, and I've actually enjoyed it quite a bit. So those are the two things I've been geeking out on over the last couple of weeks.
Man, I should have gone first. No. I work at Best Buy. I'm a manager there. Those that don't know. With the new Pixel coming out, I had a fantastic chat with their Android rep the other day, just geeking out on AI and Gemini and some of the abilities that are starting to be baked into our devices that don't require a cloud connection or internet, because there's billions of pre-programmed responses as well as adaptive AI that can combine those responses built into the chip on the device. So we're getting to a point where we've got AI that can work without any kind of connection or cloud backup. So that's just kind of been what I'm geeking out on. Gemini, Windows new Copilot Plus code creation stuff. Also with the right chip in the machine, that's built in. It doesn't need any kind of cloud or internet backup for Windows AI to work either. So the singularity is coming.
So cool.
So cool. So cool. So as always, we would ask that you rate and review the show, all of the places, Apple, Spotify, the podcatcher of your choice. And we would like to thank our supporters, our supporter, Justin Vaughn. As always, we have a Patreon. You can support the show through Captivate. If you don't want a monthly subscription model, we have merch as well. Go buy some stuff. This is a new show. We're starting here, a new format, this Topics show. Will be a series. So as we do more of these, there will eventually be a link in the description where you can watch more of these more open format topical conversations. There are more on the way. Okay. Shall we get into it?
Let's do it.
Okay. As mentioned, today's topic is, do transporters kill you? So why are each of us here today? Why did we choose to be involved in this topic? What's our relationship to just transporters and I guess this overall conversation of, do they kill you? Justin?
Yeah, well, a couple of things bring me to the table today. One is a long time, as long as I can really remember, Star Trek fan, this whole thing about scrambling oneself and reassembling and how can you still be you, and what could potentially disrupt that has been interesting to me. And also, there have been curiosities about this throughout Christianity's history. Particularly around things related to the body and the spirit and resurrection, for instance, as people would say. This was a form of torture of Christians at a certain point. Like, if you just split them up in enough places, how could they hold together in the life to come? Is splitting the body, splitting the soul, fragmenting the soul? These interesting questions that have come up across the centuries. And so I just can't wait to think about these things with you all.
Andy, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm also a long-term Star Trek geek. I'm the kind of Star Trek geek that had the Next Generation, the Enterprise D technical manual, a book they published. Justin,
yes.
All right, okay, seems like I'm in good company here. It's been a while since I looked through it, but I do remember reading through. Yep, there it is. That's exactly
there it is.
Right, reading about pattern buffers and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
And how does the inertial dampener work? Very well, thank you very much.
Why don't they turn to Jell-O?
Right. So there's that side of it. I'm also, I think, as folks may know, a big X-Men geek. There's lots of teleporting in X-Men. Just a visually cool thing to see in various media, and so that makes it interesting, exciting, and yeah, I mean, it introduces philosophical questions, it introduces scientific questions. What is the relationship between the body and the mind and the soul? Are these different substances? Are they? I have some interest in the scientific aspect of that as a hobbyist. It's not my area of research or anything like that, but. So I think very similar to Justin, just a long-standing interest in the question and related questions.
I'm in great company with you guys. Obviously, I don't remember my life without Star Trek in it, so not quite as lived as you guys, but long enough. I grew up with Bones and Kirk and McCoy and all that stuff, and I can't imagine my life without them in it. So that's part of it. And transporter mishaps have been part of Star Trek from the first series all the way to the currently running shows as well. And just in that, as a Christian, always wondered, if we get pulled apart and put back together, are we dead? Are you still you? All of those sorts of questions. And now I am part of a community where I get to discuss these things. And let's go. Let's go. So what about those listening? If you're like us, you love Trek, you're a thinking person at all, which honestly, if you click this to listen, you are. I'm sure you've pondered these same things. Is the person on the other end the same person? And so we're hoping to add our voice to your inner dialogue and help put some of these questions, probably not to rest, but at least give them voice. So there are various versions of transporter tech in different IPs. Transporters, transmat, teleporters, whatever you want to call it. How do transporters work? Or how could they work in real life? Do we want to let the scientists go first?
I think we do. I mean, I do.
So, okay. So there are two main types of teleporters, transporters, right? The one is pretty easy and not all that metaphysically interesting, right? They're the kinds that basically connect two parts of space that would not otherwise be connected through some kind of wormhole or magic or what have you, right? So think of Doctor Strange's sling ring, magic circle. Think of Nightcrawler or magic, or Blink, creating connections between disparate points. Think of the what do they call them, warp gates or something like that in the MCU that the Guardians of the Galaxy use, or like Stargate, something like that, right? So there's just a doorway, and that doorway goes from one place to another, and sort of without having to travel through all of the intermediate points, right? And that's not terribly metaphysically interesting, right? Because that's no different than walking from a what happens to me in my soul kind of question. But that's a very popular way for these things to work. The more metaphysically interesting and more kind of distinct to Star Trek, although not only in Star Trek, is this take you apart and rebuild you, or a version of you, or a copy of you, or something like that somewhere else, right? And I think they've kind of landed on that it's really the information that gets copied and then used to rebuild something, right? So they're not actually sending a beam of the atoms or molecules of you. They're scanning you and collecting that information, storing that in a pattern buffer, which can then be put in hold for indefinitely, right? So that's a common Star Trek plot, is somebody was stuck in the pattern buffer for a while or what have you, and then the information is used to rebuild that person on the other side. And the interesting wrinkle is that for a long time what we understood as information was what's now called classical information, and that's the kind of information that your computer works off of, right? So discrete bits, ones and zeros, on or off kind of thing. And so you just measure the positions and the types of all the different molecules in you and their momenta, and that's classical information that you can then use to assemble the exact same molecules and atoms in the exact same positions with the exact same momentum on the other side, and there you go. And that kind of information can be copied ad infinitum. So that's how you can have things like Riker coming out of the pattern buffer twice, and you have two different versions of Riker, for example. But we've now learned that there's something called quantum information, which has to do with now the quantum field and the different quantum fields that make up the particles that are you. And if you need quantum information to represent a person, that cannot actually be cloned. That's a mathematical theorem about quantum physics, that you can't clone or copy quantum information. So you could still, in theory, collect that information and then reproduce it somewhere else, but that would completely destroy the original version, and you wouldn't be able to clone someone out of the pattern buffer in the same way. And there's actually a scientific debate as to how much quantum information you need to represent something biological. There's one perspective which says that biology is too warm and wet to be that quantum, right? And so that classical information about the locations of all your molecules would be sufficient to reproduce at least the physical version of you. But there's another perspective which says that actually the quantum states may be important. There's evidence that specific biological processes rely on quantum physics. The mechanisms that birds use to tap into the magnetic field or to follow the magnetic field of the Earth for their navigation, the actual molecular mechanism for that seems to depend on quantum states. Photosynthesis appears, there's evidence that photosynthesis involves the quantum states of photons and entangling of photons with molecules in the plants. And there's specific classes of DNA mutations where the quantum state of the different bases of DNA, depending on the quantum state that they're in, one base can actually look like a different base momentarily. And if it's being copied at just that wrong moment, it can actually be observed as a different base and introduce a mutation. So those are some examples where quantum physics and quantum states and quantum information seem to be relevant to biology. So if that's the case, then and then you need quantum information to accurately reproduce the physical state of a person, then you wouldn't, a transporter wouldn't be able to have those kinds of cloning out of the pattern buffer mishaps that are a popular trope. So that's my info dump on what I know about transporter technology.
Nice.
Yeah, bravo. That is really, really interesting about this on the quantum level, because part of this, the question is always what makes you you. And as you started out talking about this classical information here, so what Star Trek has to do, as well as these other properties that Andy mentioned, what Star Trek has to do is say, the sum of who we are is in these constitutive parts here. That's just data. It's data, and the data makes us who we are. And anytime we talk about the soul, as this conversation will take us, then so we've got data and then we've got mystery here. And because once you start getting into this question of like, so if what makes us who we are, if what comprises our soul goes beyond this quantifiable data here, we're not even sure what to make of it in the quantum space that Andy's been talking about. Like, so what makes us us? Is it possible to move all of our data to another place and just leave our soul hanging where it was before, because it is not transportable, or it's of some substance that usually coheses to our other substance at some level that we are not yet able to. I mean, that's these really interesting questions, and I think this whole quantum piece has added quite a bit of imagination to it that I have not heard of before. So thank you, Andy, for sharing that. Fascinating.
Very welcome.
And so are those the inner and the outer forces, or is like the quantum calculation like beyond that?
I'm not sure I know what you're referencing with inner and outer forces.
So there's what are the because there's the or if we move beyond that, there's the four. What is it? There's the inner force, the outer force, gravity.
Oh, the strong and weak nuclear forces.
Right.
Okay. And then gravity and electromagnetism. Right. Yeah, those are the
Right.
4 fundamental forces.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry.
So is that classical data or is that quantum information?
Right. So well, we don't yet know how gravity and the rest of quantum physics and quantum physics, we don't know quite how to reconcile that at all energy levels. There are some versions that work okay at certain energy regimes, but we don't have a complete full picture of how to reconcile those two. So yeah, so gravity is, as most people deal with it, would not be quantum at this point, like most people conceptualize it. But the other forces are ultimately mediated by particles, which are excitations of fields from quantum field theory, right? So they're to fully represent everything that's going on at that level, you would need to take into account quantum states, or you'd only be able to represent things at a statistical or probabilistic level rather than an exact deterministic level.
A lot more to learn when it comes to that stuff, so I'm just asking.
Hi, my name is TJ. I'm here to tell you about the Systematic Ecology shop. That's where we post all of our merch. It is hosted on Creator Spring, and we have a ton of really cool merch, mostly clothing. We have hats, extra soft t-shirts, sweaters, hoodies, and more. Our hosts wear them all the time. It's actually super comfy. We have glassware, mugs, which everybody loves a good mug. Fill out your cupboard. Get rid of some old ones, which is the part that I never do. That's why I have too many cups. We have cloth bags, posters, and it's really stuff. We like to put our icons on there. We like to put quotes, things we come up with. And it's cool. It's a cool way. And a lot of it is pretty subtle too, to show support for one of your favorite shows. And my personal favorite is actually our SG dad cap, which I haven't been reluctant to buy it because now I have to wear hats at work and then I get tired of wearing hats, but it's really cool. It's really understated. It is our logo right here. And then it says Systematic Ecology on the back. It's great. It's a really good hat. We have a few of them floating around. Check it out. And if we could all just rock the SG dad cap in public, I think that'd be pretty sweet.
Sure. So, really the question all of this hinges on, as Christians, or really most religions that believe in some kind of spirit or some kind of part of a person that is more than just their physical body. We've been asking these questions for numerous thousands of years. The spirit, the flesh, body, mind, soul are these separate parts of a person. Can they be divided? And specifically for for today, is the spirit or the soul tangible? Does it have molecules or some kind of quantum energy or something that can be detected and measured and scanned if we knew what to look for?
Boy, this is such an interesting question because even when it comes to the ideas about the soul from a purely religious tradition within Judaism and in Christianity, there's thinking that sometimes. So when a body is deceased and ceases to function in a way that can properly contain the soul, there's some belief that it takes a period of days for the soul to leave the body. Now, again, different traditions do this. I mean, I've heard things from a week to 13 or so days, all the way to 30 days. Just these different ideas that people have talked about across the centuries, trying to figure out how the soul relates to the body. What is it? How do you even from a religious perspective, we're trying to figure out how these two work together, and there is not a clear answer to this in our religious traditions. So all that is to say that we can talk about it scientifically here, but even religiously, there's a huge, mysterious shoulder shrug.
Really, that becomes because that's a question that can even affect someone's eschatology.
Right.
Because I have a lot of conversations with people about intermediate states and those sorts of things, and can we exist as just soul or spirit, or is part of our identity who we are the physical? Do we require both to be us?
Mm-hmm.
And so what is what is the nature of the existence of all of this? And so if they are tangibly or intangibly linked, however they're linked, can you transport your soul? When you arrive at the destination, is this part of you that is more than a collection of molecules there as well?
Wow. This is again, this kind of thing is really hard to talk about, other than to talk about just various examples. So at the beginning of the podcast, I mentioned this a form of early Christian torture that said if you break up all the people, the soul is somehow contained in the parts. And so one way to torture the soul is to have tortured and rendered the parts so devastated, such as to make resurrection of the body impossible, right? So this idea of this deep connection between the corporeal reality and the life of our souls. And I think this is just a fascinating question.
Right.
Where does the soul rest? Does the soul in some way rest in the mind? And, as some have held. And so if that is the case, then, once the mind ceases to function or whatever, how does the soul then become separated from it, and then where does it go? So when you so there's one idea, I think, that's to say that if I all of a sudden move all of this matter then to another spot, then and if my soul is indeed something that is separate from the matter, then it's just still hanging out there. Like the transporter, the technology may not have transported that which it needs to transport. If at the subatomic level, my soul is not knit together with all these particles of my body. But then you start to say things like, well, the particles of my body are regularly, there's regularly things that are part of my body that are being removed and added to all the time. So then you start saying, wow, there is something about this form, this container which has interchangeability,
right?
That holds together somehow.
Sure, we end up with the ship of Theseus, right?
Yes, that's right. That's exactly right. So somehow the soul is connected to this, even though much of this matter changes. Otherwise, every time I drink a cup of water, I would have received bits and pieces of someone else's life and memory. So I think that's also, so it's fascinating to think for me about, I think of me as a static state, and I'm like this until I'm until I'm not like this, until this body dies. But in reality, there's been so much interchangeability over these 46 years that, and somehow the me that is me has continued to stay in this container, even though the parts of it has been interchanged.
Yeah. Oh man.
I mean, Andy, I'm interested to
Yes.
I mean, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, you have perhaps a better sense of all the interchangeability that happens over time. How do we even? I mean, why is it that all of our at a subatomic level we just hold together and continue to be us?
Yeah. Why are we still us, even though scientifically we're literally made of different stuff than we were made of when we started?
Yeah.
Right. So, that is on some level an active question of research or and philosophizing in the philosophy of science. Because for a long time there was a lot of focus on the stuff, the substance, and so if you could catalog all of the substances, then you'd know everything there was to know about a person or an organism or anything, right? And that works really well for certain kinds of things, right? For a rock, if you can catalog the different elements and minerals and so forth that make up that rock, you've got a pretty good sense of what you're dealing with. But we're appreciating more and more that there are other classes of things, dynamical systems, of which living organisms are the most well-known example, where it matters more than just what is the matter. There is a phrasing from the world of complexity science out of the Santa Fe Institute that studying the list of stuff is like those are the dancers, right? The list of all the different atoms or molecules that make up a person. Those are the dancers, and the interactions, the processes, the dynamic nature of the system, that's the dance, right? And increasingly people are appreciating that we need to know more and more about the dance and not just the dancers. And so on some level, my answer to the question of what are we, what is it that persists is that dance. We are each our own dance. And that is what needs to, that's what persists, that's what keeps going on. It needs to be mediated by dancers, right? So I would say that you can't separate the two. You can't have a soul or a spirit or a mind that just sort of disembodied. It needs to be mediated by something. But what mediates it, right? Different dancers can take up the dance at different times, but the dance keeps going. And that's, in a very, simplistic or poetic kind of expression, right? That's what we are. That's what persists. That's the you that we think of, or the me that we think of is that dance, not the list of dancers.
That. So I love the image of the dance, and this one of the images of the shared substance of the Trinity is around the dance, right? And so again, what does it mean to be three persons sharing the same substance? And
Right.
in this image of the
What
of the
is
dance.
homoousius?
Yes. I love that image of the dance emerging from the scientific community. In one way or another, I think that theologically, at least, I'm gonna try to stay in my lane here, and so I can speak as cogently as possible on this. Theologically, as much as people have tried to define or have had some interesting wonderings about this, particularly as it relates to death and the soul, and how the soul is connected to the body. At the end of the day, we are forced to or force. We're compelled to simply say it is great mystery. Theologically, there's not a chapter in the Bible where you say, "Aha, this is how we imagine it." It is a mystery, and at no point in any of the conversations in Christian theology around resurrection, at no point does Jesus seem to be concerned, or other writers and contributors in the New Testament. None of them seem to be concerned with, "Hey, friends, here's how you got to make sure you can actually be resurrected." This is not a worry. God can figure this out. And so there is something about the things that are secure in the changing nature of creation. The soul seems to be one of the most secure things that persists, at least in Christian theology, from creation to new creation at the eschaton. So it's a great mystery, but by golly, it's still fun to think about, because as we, I can things, so much is a mystery, but it hasn't kept Christians from writing volumes and volumes on some of these questions across time. And in time, by the way, is another one of these things that I've become interested in as a form of transportation. Time, because so in time travel, as you start thinking about Doctor Who, you can have 5 doctors in one place.
Right. Hold that off for the next one. That's literally my next topic is time travel.
Yeah. All right. Yeah.
So
I'll pause.
We'll have you back for that. Hold that thought till we do the next one. We'll get the crew back together and do time travel. But yeah, what I was thinking was this idea, right, of the link between the body and the soul, the physical and the intangible, and all of that, really even gets down into our theology of the sacraments, right?
Yes,
because if you think about right, is it really Christ?
Right.
Is there spiritual presence?
Yes.
Or the more modern view I'm not a fan of is that it's just some kind of remembrance. But does it need to physically be Christ for Christ to be present?
Right. Ooh,
so and that's a whole nother conversation that really is about this same thing.
Right. Well, thank you for bringing that up. That's really good. This whole idea of the real presence of Christ, various traditions still have some idea of the presence of Christ at the Eucharist, at Holy Communion, and that something of Christ's body and blood is in the grace that Christ's body and blood offers us is translated substantially into these elements, either by transforming the species of the elements. It's kind of use this obscure theological language, such that it looks like the thing that you're seeing, but it's not actually the thing that you're seeing. It's transubstantiation. Consubstantiation is still the thing you're seeing, but it's with the body and blood of Christ as well. And even this idea of real presence that says, I don't know exactly about all of that, but Christ is still present, right, in some real way in the taking of these things.
It means something, it does something, but it's still bread.
Yeah, yes, yes. And for Jesus to say, whenever you do these things, you partake of my body, you partake of my blood. Wow. Okay. So something. So you. So thinking of communion as one big across the present, and then I'm just a little bit of a hint toward what you're talking about next time. But even across time,
Yep.
Jesus is there in all of those places.
He is
at all of those.
he is transported
Yes.
to all of those places.
Yes. That is like, I love this idea that we're transporting Jesus I'm going to be presiding at communion this coming Sunday, and this is what's going to be on my. I might even stumble through my words, and people think, "What's going on with Pastor Justin?" He's thinking internally. I'm thinking. I'm listening. I'm hearing Jesus saying, "Beam me down, Scotty." When I say, "Pour out your spirit on these gifts of bread and wine," I'm like, beam him down, Scotty. Beam him down, Holy Spirit. Beam Jesus down.
You're welcome. You can have that free of charge.
I am. This is going to last my entire ministry. Thank you.
And these are the things, people, that stick with us.
Oh my gosh.
So, dude, I mean, obviously that conversation will never be exhausted, but, this is supposed to be an hour-ish. So, are we ready to move on to the question at hand now that we have kind of defined terms and laid the table and created the background?
Yes.
Okay. So, with all that's been said, and all of that in mind, do transporters kill you? Is your body, mind, and soul all present at the new location? Is it you? Is it a copy? So on and so on. Do you die on the pad?
Andy, what say you?
I'll go ahead and put my cards on the table, and you guys can tell me if I'm wrong or not. I'm going to come down on the side of no, it doesn't kill you. I'm going to say that, I would expect that there is actually a need for dealing with quantum information, and so it's really you. It is the only version of you, right? Has been moved from one place to another. Everything that is you can be captured in that quantum information and relocated. Right? The matter on the other side is just as competent to mediate the dance that is you going forward. And even though there might seem to be sort of a discontinuity, we believe that ourselves persist across the discontinuities of sleep or general anesthesia during surgery, right? And there's pretty strong evidence that there's some wacky things going on there in your brain, that things are shutting down and that and restarting and so forth. And so yeah, I would say I would feel confident that there's nothing substantially different between going to sleep today and waking up tomorrow and believing that that's me, that I didn't die last night and a new someone else woke up in my bed. And likewise, I stepped onto the transporter pad and I stepped off on, whatever other planet, and it's still me, and carries on, whatever continuity that I was previously part of. I'll plant my flag there, and you guys can decide how you want to correct me.
I hope that's true. I would love to, be able to transport from one place to another without, loss of my soul. Yeah, I just part of me wants to believe that the soul is unquantifiable, unscannable, whatever. And maybe that's just a need in me for things to be bigger than we can comprehend, for the universe of God to be mysterious. So like that side of me wants to say the soul's unquantifiable. There's no way. But the part of me that really wants to step in a transporter and step out somewhere else wants you to be correct.
I think that Andy said what I might want to say much better than I can say it. So what I might add in my own ways to say that I do believe that in some mystical way, for the time of God's choosing, who I am, my soul is tied to this form, where it appears, how it appears. It has been interchangeable across time already, and my soul has still chosen to adhere to it. And that will be so until it is not. And so I do think that we would still be alive. I think of a scripture that I really can't quite easily make work with this, what we're talking about. But I think about that passage in 1 Corinthians 15, I think it is, where Paul talks about, he's talking about resurrection. Mm-hmm. And the general resurrection is what he's talking about. But he's talking about, in the blink of an eye, in an instant, in the blink of an eye, at that final trumpet, there will be the change. Well, this is the transporter technology is one of those things that is like a sign of the things to come. In the blink of an eye, I can appear in this body that is both mine, but has also been renewed somehow in this transporter technology from one place to another place. And I am there with it. So it is maybe a foretaste of things to come.
Of glory divine?
Yes.
Blessed assurance. Yes.
That's what I would hum every time I got onto the transporter pad. Blessed assurance.
The assurance you'll walk out the other side. Yeah.
Because this conversation made me more. Now I finally have more sympathy for Bones, for Leonard McCoy getting onto that transporter pad, because now that y'all have talked and made me think and rethink, I'm like, well, I hope I will be there. I believe I will be there, but my gosh, I'm concerned about a little bit more concerned about the scramble than I was before.
Yep. So it's been fun. I don't know that we have put poor old Bones any more at ease than when we started, but here we are on the other side. I think we all agree that at least physically, transporters don't kill you. Your substance, your collection of molecules and energies successfully move from one place to the other with whatever the spark of life may be, still intact. And I hope that Andy is correct as well, that whatever it is that does this dance is inextricably linked to this form, and me is still me on the other side. So I think we should wrap it up there, because we have to end somewhere, or this will go forever.
We're about to get caught in a pattern buffer, is what you just said.
Oh, man. So, recommendations. Justin, what do you recommend to the viewers?
Well, again, I mentioned it before, but if you're really into this Fallout idea, and you like kind of dystopian westerns, then this it's a fun and entertaining show. Thinking about how humanity. This is another show talking about how humanity responds to crisis. So that's a fun one to watch if you're just looking for something different.
Andy?
I'm going to go with a novel by M.R. Carey. We might know him as Mike Carey from certain other media, called Infinity Gate. It is a science fiction book. It is the first of a series of 2 books so far, and that's how it's described as a duology. But these things can always metastasize. The second book is already out. I'm blanking on the name of the second book. I've just finished Infinity Gate. It is about it's sort of a Star Trek, but if all the worlds that they were exploring were other Earths in other parts of the multiverse, right? It's got that. So. And there's a heavy element of transporter technology because they have this device called the step gate or steppers that allows them to transport from one Earth to another Earth, right? So you actually go to the exact same location on that other Earth.
So that's almost like sliders.
Yeah. And so there's this whole pan universe empire called the Pan Dominion. And they have discovered a rival force of AI, and so there's a whole big plot on that level. But there's also, of course, interesting characters from a variety of different Earths, where different species ultimately gave rise to sapient individuals, right? So sometimes it's rabbits, and sometimes it's bears, and sometimes it's monkeys and apes and so forth, and so there's all these different cultures and species interacting. So there's all kinds of fun stuff at that level. There's the high scale empire building, empires colliding kind of stuff, and then there's just some the interesting questions about the metaphysics of the multiverse and I think it even kind of gestures in the direction of that same question of when I step onto this step plate and step off on another universe, is that still me kind of question. So
yeah.
You're not going to find any new answers to that particular question in the book. It might be in the second book. I haven't finished the second book, but it's still a very, very fun story. I finished the first one and immediately was like, okay, I gotta pick up the second one. So yeah, Infinity Gate, M.R. Carey.
Yeah,
that's great.
I finally got Max recently, so I've gone back and I'm watching the old Batman animated series from like 92, the best Batman. And so that is my recommendation for anyone that hasn't seen it to watch it. It is the best Batman. Batman is forever Kevin Conroy.
I still whistle that Joker theme regularly.
Yep.
So good. So good.
Okay, dear listeners, rate and review on the Podchaser of your choice, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, what have you. Thank you again to our supporters and specifically to Justin Vaughn. And remember, we are all a chosen people, a geekdom of priests.
Hello, friends. If you enjoy systematic ecology, a great way to support us and to keep us moving forward into the future is to be a patron on our Patreon network. If you're a Patreon, then you get live access to our YouTube exclusives like Comic Book Ketchup and Manga Mustard, Drinks with Tejas, and also some extra content there with our companion series to go along with our annual theme. If you're a patron, you get exclusive merch like t-shirts and handbags and mugs. There's also a bonus extra question that has extra content. In each episode, we go deeper into our faith and the questions that we're wrestling with, but we also do this extra question to jump in and share about, and patrons get to hear how we answer that question. There's discounts on our store. You get access to any future online D&D campaigns. You can easily access all of our Patreon content through our Spotify page where it says exclusive content for subscribers. That could be you folks. And all that being said, you get the satisfaction that you help us keep the lights on and keep us moving forward with our software, our marketing, our equipment, staying current in the podcast game. We love systematic ecology. We hope you do too. Support us moving forward. Thank you for all that you are. We know there's a lot of great choices and content out there, and you choose to listen to systematic ecology. Thanks, folks. We love you. Peace.
If you love our show, you can follow the whole network in a single feed on Spotify at Anazara Ministry Podcast or the network page on Apple Podcasts. There you'll find shows like The Homely, The Whole Church Podcast, My Seminary Life, Let Nothing Move You, Dummy for Theology, The Bible After Hours, as well as mine and my husband's show, The Clydes, where my husband Taylor and I go through weekly discussions in a devotional conversational method to help us all get closer to one another and God.